Hello and a very warm welcome to another edition of Talking Germany, the show where we do just that. And my guest today is a man who is highly talented, charismatic, passionate, sometimes angry, restless, outspoken and very, very versatile. Here he is, that man in person, Utz Claassen. That was a good introduction, wasn't it?
Oh, thanks a lot, yes.
He looked quite pleased with that. Now, Utz Claassen, he was a very bright young man. I'm not saying he's not a very bright man these days, but he was a very bright young man, and he got one of the best school-leaving grades ever here in Germany. That opened the way for a career at the highest levels of corporate management that included names like McKinsey, Ford, Volkswagen, and one of Germany's biggest companies, the energy giant NBW, to put it into the English. He's also an academic and a business consultant. He's sold lots of books, and everywhere he goes, he tells people precisely what he thinks and why, for which they are not always grateful, to put it mildly. He is, I'm sure, going to be a fascinating guest. Utz Claassen, your first job is to explain the German word for our English audience, and that German word is Querdenker. What is a Querdenker?
A Querdenker is a person who is, in a positive and constructive way, challenging traditional thought flows, traditional ways of thinking, who is asking innovative questions, who is asking unusual questions, and who tries to be innovative through questions and through questioning things.
And what you say, your main contention at this point in time is that there are not enough of these people, these Querdenker, these mavericks, these people who go against the flow here in Germany.
Well, we are a society that is very well organized. That's one of our strengths.
Without a doubt.
The structures, the flows of processes are very well organized. But the price you pay for that is that everybody becomes a well-functioning part of that organization. And over time, that leads to the fact that people become so adapted to the organization that they lose their own identity to some extent, and they at least in the work process, and they lose the readiness and the courage to also challenge and question what's happening in their organization. And I always believe that, yes, we need to be part of an organization, we need to fit in with an organization, but we also need to maintain our creativity and our dependence of thinking, and we need to maintain the ability to question what's happening every day in order to contribute towards improvements.
So what you're saying is that in many ways, Germany is a little bit complacent, is becoming a little bit set in its way, and that the successes that Germany enjoys at the moment are perhaps in danger in the medium term.
Success is always in danger if you don't change, because the world is changing rapidly, day after day after day. And the change process is continuously being accelerated. So today, if you keep your absolute position, your relative position in the world deteriorates every day. If you want to be leading edge, leading technology, if you want to have an adequate welfare system, you need to improve every day to maintain your relative standard in this ever more complex world.
Yeah, but I mean, people outside in the big wide world listening to this, listening to what you're saying here, they will be astonished because they look to Germany as a country that is good at running its economy, is good at selling goods around the world, is good at registering patents. It gets things right. It's a problem-solving country. And you're sounding like a sort of a doom and gloom merchant who says that, you know, big problems are just around the corner. It's easy to say there are big problems around the corner because they don't have to arrive tomorrow. You'll say, well, I actually meant next year or the year after.
Let's say, for me, I'm always interested in the future, in the time period which we can still impact upon. And I see that Germany has been relatively successful in the last 10 years. And the question is, how can we ensure that we will be successful in the next 10 or 20 years? And our relative strength normally, as I said, is to react in a logical manner, to react fast, to be stringent, to be consequent, to be rigid in what we do. But our strength is normally not to be super creative, to be super intuitional, to do positively surprising things. And I think the world is going to change, and we also need to work on that front, and we also need to be even better at exploiting our innovative potential.
Yeah, Utz Claassen, we saw you there on that television programme when you were 17 years old, wearing that yellow shirt, that lemon shirt, yeah? When you see yourself in that image, what do you think?
I think I had a few pounds less of weight then.
Yeah, it's probably true. You know better than I do, yeah? You made the impression of being a super, ultra, unbelievably, incredibly confident young man, almost too much of a good thing.
Well, I just enjoyed life. Life was not very complicated then. I had just left school when that TV program was live on TV.
Yeah.
And after that, I had a fantastic time at Hanover University and then a wonderful time at the University of Oxford. So that was during a phase within my life, and I think within everybody's life, when you're not even 20 years old, when things are not so complicated and you enjoy the beauty of life.
Well, good for you is all I can say. But that joy that you are describing as a young man and the confidence, the undoubted confidence that you had, you got that from your parents. We're going to have a look at some images of you as a youngster, you as your parents. Tell me about the values that they passed on to you.
Well, from my father, who has been a social democrat for half a century and whose parents died when he was 3 in the year of 1916. I learned 2 values, which is tolerance and equality of opportunity to everybody.
There we can see your father and your mother while you're talking about
From my mother, I learned never to be afraid of people, always to have respect. Have respect for seniority, for position, for age, but never fear. And the highest reflection of respect that I learned from my mother is honesty. So never tell your boss or tell an elderly person what they want to hear, always tell them the truth.
Just 1 second. Utz Claassen is a young man, again, around the same sort of age, the favourite, the golden boy of all teachers, yeah?
Yeah, but
that's what that headline says.
Yeah, but that's a slightly misleading headline, because also during school time I asked a lot of difficult questions, and there were teachers who I had a super relationship with. In one case, there's even a friendship until today. But some teachers also found me very difficult with all my strange and difficult questions.
I can imagine, yeah? You chose, with this talent that you had and this self-confidence that you had, yeah? You chose to go into the world of business, yeah? And when you describe, in your book, which we're going to be having a look at shortly, when you describe the world of business, what comes through? You talk about being let down, you talk about being deceived, you talk about bitterness, you talk about an environment that is unimaginably extreme. That's what you say. You say if the people down there, down below, knew what goes on up at the top, then we'd have a serious problem in our society. Why is the world of business so shockingly inhuman?
I think it's not only the world of business, I think also the world of politics has a lot of disputable and critical qualities and characteristics. And the system is very power-oriented, and the system is very much reproducing itself over time. It's very much reproducing the type of people who are coming into top positions, and very frequently it's not the creative, it's not the charming, it's not the innovative people, but it's the power-aware people who know the rules of the game and who know how to use the rules of the game. But there are other examples, and I think in Germany we have a saying.
Give me an example of one top politician in Germany at the moment to whom what you have just said applies.
The honesty, the creativity, or...
The lack of honesty, the lack of creativity.
Well, switch on German TV at night, watch the news, and you will hear a lot of things where the whole population know.
Are we talking about the finance minister, the foreign minister? Are we talking about Angela Merkel?
I'm not criticizing individual people. We're talking about the way...
But what you're saying is really damning of German politics. And I rub up with German politicians on a day-to-day basis, and they tend to be pretty authentic, honest people.
No, we should not give the world a misleading impression of Germany. Politicians all over the world are politicians, And we always dislike our own politicians most because we know them better than the others. So when I go to the US or to Italy, you believe politicians there, and the Italians and the Americans will tell you our politicians are not better or worse than yours. It's the same everywhere. I think it's the system. And the system leads to the fact that politicians don't do what's good for the next and the second next generation, but what's good for the next election. And very frequently, what is good for the next election is long-term damaging the interest of the population.
Yeah.
And that is the same in Germany.
Let's go back to the world of business, because the world of business that you have generally worked in down the years, over 20 years, was really the corporate sector, the DAX companies, the blue chip companies. A lot of the people that I meet in Germany are associated with the small and medium-sized companies that are really the backbone of Germany's export industry. They're totally different from the people you're describing. They're dynamic. They have flat hierarchies. They're people who are very, very inventive, creative, think outside the box.
Peter, I also describe super good managers like Ferdinand Piëch or Hartmut Medorn is another example. We have in this country, like in every country, also very good managers. But again, the problem is the system. And the system does not like too many questions to be asked, too many open discussions to be held, too many problems to be openly discussed and confronted. The system is maintaining its position. And I believe that what we need is a culture of sharing knowledge instead of preserving knowledge as an instrument of power. What we need is a culture of open discussion instead of no questions being allowed to be asked. And what we need is a culture where contradiction is seen as something positive in order to create innovation and progress, and where conflicting views are not seen as a societal taboo.
And after the Fukushima disaster a couple of years ago, Angela Merkel pretty promptly came out and said that she had decided to phase out nuclear energy here in Germany by 2022. Was she right to do so?
The decision, you can view positively or criticize. The process was scandalous because the decision was taken within days against the background of a regional election in southwest Germany. And every nation, every political system, every people has the right to decide whether it wants to work with or without nuclear energy. That's fine. But the radical changes that were made should have been based on more analysis, on more facts, on more thought. And we should not have rushed into things just against the background of a regional election.
It's interesting, isn't it? With Angela Merkel, people tend to criticise her for arriving at decisions very, very, very slowly, generally speaking, because she looks to see what all the different lines of argument that are out there. She also looks very closely to see how the voters are, tuned into a story or not. And certainly on this one, I mean, yes, what you're saying is it all happened very quickly, but she was right in line with German voters on this, and still is.
Yes, but having said that, we have to also say that 1 year after those decisions were made, the then German environmental minister, Altmaier, came around the corner and said the costs of the Energiewende, of the energy turnaround, could be in total, with other infrastructural costs, of up to 1,000 billion euro.
A trillion.
A trillion. And well, he called it 1,000 billion, a trillion. And I think if a CEO of a large corporate company were to withhold the fact for a year that there could be a cost of 1 trillion related to something, he would be in deep trouble. And that's what I criticize of politicians in Germany and abroad. We need more transparency. If they want us to follow the energy turnaround, fine. But please, based on all the facts and not just on some of the facts.
But you know as well as I do, I mean, this figure that you are quoting, first of all, there was an element of sort of loose talk about it. It was an ill-advised statement. I don't think anybody was trying to sort of hide anything. I think the real problem is that the German government hasn't got the faintest idea how much this 20-year project is likely to cost. That's the problem.
Well, if you don't have the faintest idea, then you have to say that when you take the decision. Then you have to say, ladies and gentlemen, we take a decision here which could have multi-billion effects, but we do not have the faintest idea. And you want to follow us on that, although we do not have the faintest idea.
Sure, you're right.
Yeah, let's imagine a company CEO would do that. He would be subject to a lot of civil and criminal lawsuits.
Is there or is there not? It seems to me that German society, you're saying Germany is still an efficient country. I think it is an efficient country.
Very efficient.
Two of the greatest achievement, or no, the greatest achievement in recent times here in Germany, I would propose, is German reunification. Absolutely. Is by and large making that huge project work. And at the beginning of that project, which was also a 20-year project, the government had not the faintest idea where it was going to go, how much it was going to cost, how long it was going to last. But I think pretty much everybody in the country agreed it was the right thing to do, and it was a leap of faith that we were going to make with the government.
Two totally different subjects. The German reunification, a political process where you can never know upfront what's happening. The energy turnaround, within a political area that is very well researched, where a lot of facts and interrelationships are known, and where a lot of facts were deliberately ignored, like, for example, the implications on the CO2 emissions, because at the time that happened, the German #1 environmental policy goal was still reduce CO2 emissions, and we now see, and it was clear that it would come, we have the highest level of lignite use in electricity production in Germany since 24 years ago, and we have increasing CO2 emissions. And that would happen was crystal clear, and no politician or hardly anybody said it clearly to the population. So I'm not against the energy turnaround. It's a fascinating process. I'm in favor of innovation. I'm in favor of taking certain risks, but I'm against taking irresponsible risks, and I'm against not creating and ensuring the biggest transparency possible for the population. But Germany is a fantastic country, but my job as a German citizen is to contribute to where we can get better in the future, instead of sitting and lying back and being happy how good it is.
Okay. The one thing I think we would agree on is that this project is daring. That's for sure. There's a huge element of risk about the project. You could say that it's a pioneering project. And I think around the world, certainly in a place like Japan, they're looking very closely at whether Germany can make this work, because that would send out signals to other countries that you can move from fossil fuels, you can move from nuclear energy sources to renewable energy sources. And my question to you is, because I know you know the business, is it going to work? I mean, aside from, all the politicking, is it going to work?
I believe that we will, in this century, reach a stage where the world will go into a global, regenerative, solar, wind-assisted energy world, which is purely regenerative and where we will not depend to the slightest on fossil fuels. But I also believe that the German way, because the world is interconnected and climate protection doesn't stop at the border between Germany and a neighboring country, we will see that the German way of the energy turnaround will increase CO2 emissions, will increase electricity prices in Germany, and will become a burden for German industry for a certain period of time.
Well, a lot of young people here in Germany complaining about their lot. Are they justified?
Look, I very frequently visit Spain because I'm also invested into a Spanish professional football club, and I've spent many years in Spain, and I love Spain. I really love Spain and the Spanish. But if we look at Southern Europe, we have a youth unemployment rate of up to more than 50%, in some extreme cases up to 60, 65, 66%. If 2/3 of a whole generation get a feeling that there are no perspectives for them or the perspectives are vanishing. That is a societal catastrophe. And I think that is the key European challenge. If we believe that the European family shall function, and I also address this in my book, by the way, not troublemaker, but uncomfortable is the title. Troublemaker is
Mr. Uncomfortable.
That is a bit misleading. So my English teacher would be very surprised, but anyway, my Oxford tutor as well. But anyway, no, this is the European challenge. We cannot accept that up to two-thirds of a generation in an important region of Europe is losing its perspectives.
I must say I was very surprised after Angela Merkel after the recent election here in Germany. She formed her new government and then they declared what government policy was going to be for the years to come. And I had imagined that Angela Merkel would opt for some kind of pan-European programme to support the kind of things, efforts against youth unemployment and what have you. It didn't come. Two questions. First of all, I suppose, why, when you're describing the extent of the problem in Spain, which is something you know about, I wonder why young people in Spain aren't angrier.
They are angry, but Spain is a country where the value of the family is still exorbitant. It's enormous, and it has a strong Catholic quality. So you have the family structure and the Catholic belief, and the two things interlinked absorb the problem towards a certain limit. If in London or Berlin or New York we had 65% youth unemployment, it would be difficult to walk on the streets without some security protection. Yeah. And in Spain, people are still very patient because the family is absorbing a lot of the problems, but that will only work for so long and not forever. On the German politics, in Spain, there was a very heavy reaction towards the pension reform in Germany, because the Spanish reaction, summarized in a sentence, was, how can it be that the same politicians and the same chancellor who imposed the change from 65 to 67 years on Spain gives its own people a change from 65 to 63. Yeah. And now, as a German, you could say we can afford it, but it's not only a question of whether we can afford it. If we believe in a European family, this is not a good development.
Okay, and if Angela Merkel were to come to you and say, Utz Claassen, you know about business, you know about Spain, you know about the problem in Spain, you've just described it, and say, what should we, the German government, do? What can we do?
I would say change the euro protection program totally. So far, the policy has been the euro is in high risk, so let's send checks to the intensive care station to rescue it. My view is, if somebody in the family is ill, you don't send a check to the intensive care unit, but you visit the person, you talk to the person, you assist the person. And with Southern Europe, they need infrastructural help. We need to intensify academic links. We need to improve education, also the professional education for people in the jobs and on the jobs. There's all types of infrastructural support that we can give instead of just sending checks to the south.
Yeah, but of course you say all the time we should be telling the truth to the German voters. And
it will cost money.
It would cost a pretty penny. It would cost an awful lot of money. And I don't know if the German voters would go with it.
Yeah, but I think that discussion we have to have. Because the honesty is, the challenge in Europe is bigger than we think. It's not small, and it will be more costly than we think. And either we are prepared to invest into the future of the European youth, or we will pay an even higher political price.
Well, that is the question, isn't it? Is these fair play regulations that are going to be introduced, are they going to give European soccer a level playing field, yes or no?
Hopefully, but I think it's not the key issue, because if Mr. Abramovich were to give 100 million from his private fortune into the football club, I don't see that as a major problem. It's a much bigger problem if club responsibles abuse the money of third parties, of third people, and if they burden their clubs with tens or hundreds of millions of debt, and if they take irresponsible actions for which they have not put in the money. And I therefore believe that it is indeed a key task to ensure that the finances of professional clubs are in order, are professional, are transparent. But equality is a nice topic that I appreciate, but order, correct numbers, no debt, and not spending more money than you have is more important than equality.
You're sounding very German. You're sounding almost like Wolfgang Schäuble, the German finance minister, sort of lecturing to other European countries in the Eurozone crisis. But and I think what you're saying is, it's a clear message. And at this present point in time, there's a lot of debate about the sort of the Germans on this, and not just in Germany, are being portrayed as the good guys. They're getting it right in terms of the way they manage the business model they have for their clubs. Are the Spanish football clubs like the one that you are responsible for as well, involved with your holding, are they the bad guys?
In Spain, well, we have had the World Cup of 2006, and I'm all against lecturing others because there's no reason for lecturing. When I came into Hanover, and my successor was just in your film, when I came into the Hanover Football Club, there was a lot of debt in Hanover. In Germany, the situation has improved dramatically with the 2006 World Cup and all the stadium infrastructure around it. And there was a lot more turnover and income generated within the new stadium infrastructure afterwards. Today, very clearly, the Spanish league and the Spanish clubs, by and large, have more financial difficulties. Mallorca is one example for that. It's been a few very, very difficult years. And I have had to invest a lot of time into transparency and reducing debt and ensuring the highest level of integrity. And it's still a difficult struggle. But I think Germany has other problems, and we have benefited a lot from the 2006 World Cup. And with the German stadium infrastructure, Spanish football would have less problems.
OK, that's a good answer. You don't just invest in soccer. You invest also, because we're talking about what you do these days, we've looked at what you did in the past, you also invest with a startup company in broken bones. And you've got something here, yeah?
I have invested in a company which is engaged in bioabsorbable metallic implants. We are the first company in the world, the only company in the world up to today, which has received a CE approval to be allowed to market this product in 30 European markets. It's a metallic compression screw, which is bioabsorbable. So after a certain period of time, it is being dissolved. And that means that the second surgical operation for removing the implant becomes obsolete, which can and should hopefully mean half the time, half the risk, half the pain, half the infection risk to millions of patients who could do without a second operation in the future. We have introduced the product into the German market in summer 2013. And within 2014, we have started our first export markets. And we are just on the process of also starting to export outside Europe.
OK. It sounds very promising, I have to say. Yeah, interesting stuff. I've got to ask you two questions, though, before we're getting we're getting close to the end of the show. One of the questions I'd like to ask you is what would your advice be to the 17-year-old Utz Claassen when you look back and you see that young lad on TV, yeah, knowing what you know now as somebody who's now just beyond 50? What would your advice be to the young man?
To do what he regards as right, to always follow certain values of truth, honesty, and consequence. I would advise him in today's world maybe to study astrophysics, because the world outside, or let's say the universe outside our planet, is so fascinating. And I restricted myself to management studies, economics, medicine, and industrial design. I would say to the young Utz Claassen, maybe you should also go for astrophysics.
OK. And my other question that I really, really want to ask is that you've implied, and I know you've said this outside the show, you've published your intention to go into German politics. And today you've indicated that you're not happy with the way the politicians are doing things. You want a sort of what could be described as a new approach, possibly a populist new approach. When are you going to declare your intentions proper?
at the right time, which is still being at the right time, which is still being determined.
Are we talking about before the end of this year?
We are talking before being too old and within still being credible in front of the announcement I made. Not so long ago, I said on a German TV show we need liability for politicians, like for managers and everybody else. The support was fantastic.
Okie dokie, we'll have to wait and see. I for one, I'm very intrigued to see what comes of what this man has been telling me about German politics. He's eloquent, he's outspoken, he's passionate, he's Utz Claassen. He's been a great guest. If you've enjoyed his company as much as I have, do come back next week. Until then, bye-bye and tschüss.